If you watch the news, you're probably very confused about what's going on in the real estate market. Well, I'm going to talk specifically about the Chicago real estate market today. I'm going to discuss 5 things that you might want to know about the Chicagoland real estate market here in 2023. Just for reference, the time of this recording is June of 2023. So we are entering into that summer real estate market. I want to welcome you all back to another episode of Chicago Suburbs Living. As always, I'm your host, John Sintich. I'm your guide to all things real estate in the Chicagoland area. I am a licensed realtor in the state of Illinois. If you need any real estate needs, if you need help buying, selling, investing in real estate, reach out to me. All my contact information is in this video. It's going to be on the screen and in the description. Myself or someone from my team will reach out to you within 24 hours of you reaching out to us. Please do not hesitate. I'd be more than happy to help you. Let's get right into this video. So the first thing you're going to want to know is that we are in a seller's market. The current market conditions are favoring sellers. With a limited inventory and continued strong buyer demand, sellers do have the upper hand when it comes to negotiating and getting their terms when selling their properties. Home buyers in Chicago are facing stiff competition, which often leads to multiple offers on those desirable properties. The low supply of available homes for sale, coupled with an influx of motivated buyers, has put upward pressure on home prices, continuing to increase in value over time. As a result of this, sellers are seeing shorter days on market and favorable selling conditions, which has allowed them to secure more favorable terms and higher profits when they do end up selling their home. It's very important for buyers right now to be fully prepared, work closely with experienced real estate agents that know this market and how to succeed in this market, and be able to act swiftly when they notice an opportunity, and be ready to act quickly in order to navigate this complex housing market in Chicago. The second thing you really want to know about is that low inventory. So I know I mentioned low inventory leading to higher home prices, but it's important to understand why we do have low inventory. So in order to understand it, let's take a quick history lesson. Back in 2008, the real estate market crashed, which caused a global economic recession, as well as essentially a depression here in the United States. I could spend hours really covering that '08 crash and what happened leading up to it, and how it's a lot different now in 2023, how the economic factors are very different. But for the sake of duration of time and making this a shorter video, we'll save that for another video. If you're interested, comment below if you'd like to see me break down what happened in 2008 versus now. Happy to do that, but we'll leave that for the sake of today's video. So this is the important thing to know. After this crash in 2008, home building slowed significantly. For the last 14 years or so, we've had single-family home completions below the national average every single year. And simply put, the amount of homes being built can't keep up with the amount of population growth we've experienced in that same time. That's number one. Number two is the fact that 99% of homeowners right now have a mortgage that's lower than the current mortgage interest rates. A lot of them have locked in an interest rate under 4%. And none of these homeowners want to sell their house right now because they have an interest rate. Maybe it's 2.5%, maybe it's 3%. They don't want to sell and then go buy something at a 6.5%, 7% interest rate. So the lack of people selling and the lack of homes being built since 2008 has led to a dramatically low supply of homes for sale right now. So in the Chicago real estate market, we continue to grapple with this challenge of low inventory, which is creating a very competitive environment for home buyer, which in turn is driving up those home prices. Okay, let's get to number 3 of the most important things you want to know about the Chicago real estate market, and that's the high interest rates. I've touched on it a few times already in this video, but a huge factor that affects the Chicago real estate market are mortgage interest rates. At the time of recording this video, the 30-year fixed mortgage interest rate is 7.1%. At the beginning of 2022, mortgage rates were under 4%, just to put that in perspective. So in about a year and a half, we've seen mortgage interest rates go from 2.5% to 3% roughly. These higher interest rates have had a dramatic effect on affordability, right, of what people can afford, and it's drastically slowed down the real estate market in Chicago. We've seen a 20 to 30% decrease in pending home sales from the same time last year. Less people are buying. So why have mortgage rates gone up so much? The quickest and dirtiest way I can describe this to show you this graph and explain how mortgage rates are impacted by inflation greatly. So this line graph shows the 30-year fixed mortgage rate. That's the line on top, the blue line. And the pinkish line is the core consumer price index, which is a measure of inflation. You can see from January of 2018 all the way to January of 2020, right before COVID hit. Okay, we had this little recession when COVID hit, and then the Federal Reserve, the government, essentially, the central bank of the United States, they implemented a process called quantitative easing. And what they did here is they artificially kept mortgage rates low because they wanted to continue to stimulate the economy. They didn't want the economy to crash and burn because everyone was locked down during COVID. And you can see here, as we go through January of 2021, inflation starts to skyrocket. But what do we see with the 30-year fixed mortgage rate? It stays low. During this quantitative easing period, it stays low. The Federal Reserve, this was artificially kept low so that people would continue to buy and our economy didn't crash. They just did it for far too long. And eventually, inflation got completely out of control all the way up here, right? And they said, okay, we need to start raising interest rates. So what the Fed did was they started selling mortgage-backed securities. What happens when they do this is interest rates go up, essentially. And they did this to fight inflation because inflation was getting out of control. And you can see the 30-year fixed mortgage rate shoot up as inflation shoots up more, okay? Now we're seeing inflation come down slowly and mortgage rates are starting to follow suit, but we're not there yet. The fourth thing you should know about the Chicago real estate market is the low volatility. So the Chicago real estate market has much less volatility than some of these other markets. So over the last few years, we've seen a crazy boom in home prices in some of these markets like Austin, Texas, places in Florida and Utah, Tennessee, the Carolinas. Some of these markets saw a 30 to 40% increase in home prices in just 2 years' time. Just crazy appreciation. And so these are the markets right now that are getting hit harder than areas like Chicago. Chicago is just kind of a middle of the road, more of a stable market. For one, it's in the Midwest, and two, we have a very strong job market here. There's a lot of companies that have their headquarters in Chicago, which gives a reason for people to move to Chicago or just to live in Chicago in general. So we don't see these large fluctuations of appreciation and depreciation. So in Chicago, we're projecting home values here in 2023 to just kind of stay flat or even appreciate 1% to 2%. And this might surprise you despite, all the things you've seen on the news about the housing market. It's just not as volatile here in Chicago. It's just a much more affordable market compared to some of these other major metropolitan areas in the country. Okay, last on our list, the juiciest one is going to be politics. I'm absolutely not an expert, so I try to stay away from talking about things that I'm not an expert in and things that I have absolutely no control over. But these are things that you want to know. The city of Chicago recently elected a new mayor, Brandon Johnson, which actually has a lot of real estate professionals and citizens concerned. This is just based on some of his politics and some of the policies he said that he wants to implement during his tenure. For one thing, there are proposed changes that he wants to make to the tax structure in Chicago, which will, one, increase your income tax if you make over $100,000 a year, which in Chicago is basically middle class. You have to really earn about 6 figures to live comfortably in Chicago. So there's going to be a tax on that. There's also going to be increases on property transfer tax and a mansion tax that's supposed to be proposed as well. So this affects your bottom line when you go to sell your property. There are also concerns about potential increases in crime rates, which is really hard to believe given how high crime rates already are in the city of Chicago. So that's certainly just something to keep your eye on in the next few years. Keep in mind, all the tax proposals that I just mentioned are simply that, they're proposals. Nothing's written into law at this point, but it's just something you want to keep your eye on if that affects your decision making or not. All right, folks, that is going to be it for today's video. If you found any value in it whatsoever, please do me a huge favor, hit the like button, subscribe to my channel. I make videos just like this every week about all things living, breathing, sleeping, playing in the Chicagoland area. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next video.